Hey guys, I could tell this day is going to turn. It's like chaos not getting to Kentuckiana, first of all. So I've got all this stuff to do, getting haircuts and trying to get a treatment for myself at the clinic. And I just don't see how, with all that and building and getting the car clean, I'm going to be able to produce another video other than when I'm driving. So that's why in the car. I wanted to do it before I forgot what I wanted to say or what I wanted to talk about. I've been watching several videos, research videos on YouTube, and it occurred to me that although a few of my favorite people are talking about this, they're not explicitly explaining it so that there's a paradigm shift in the mind of the person. So whether you're talking Nassim Haramein and he's talking about resonance, whether you're talking about Jimmy at Brighter Insight and he's talking about these different facts from history and geology, or you're talking about Randall Carlson and he's focusing on events, nobody seems to be turning it into a discussion of how intricate the entire web is. Right, so in Buddhism, there's this concept of the interconnected jewel net, wherein each jewel reflects all the other jewels. Now, that is a discussion of the Buddha nature or Christ-like self, however you want to say it, in each person being the same in each person. As Nassim Haramein would say, there's a resonant frequency that is shared between all people at all times, and thus the we are one. Of course, we're not all one. If we were all one, we could get along. So we shouldn't kid ourselves in saying that we're all one. Right now, we're not. And maybe we were in the past, but we're not right now. Now, as regards the issue of catastrophism, as regards the issue of what happened to humanity and why it happens, I think that people are underestimating the impact and power of the things that you have to kind of put your mind into. So if you, like, for example, if you haven't seen that new Swedish movie I was talking about, The Wave, you really should see it because it gives a better sense of scale than say the San Andreas movie, which was on its own kind of unreasonable, and it's I mean, if you have basically a magnitude 10 point or 9.2 or however big it was in the movie, the effect of that is going to be so sweeping that really the movie, the best it did was to show the destruction of the Golden Gate Bridge, and that was all eye candy. To feel the overwhelming sense of power and majesty of Mother Nature, you really need something like in the movie The Wave, where they really give you a sense of how terrific it would be, just terrifying to be chased. You're trying to get up a mountain and you're being chased. You're on the clock and you're racing against this force of nature. And bear in mind, all these like the skiers that got trapped on the volcano in Japan just this last week. Bear in mind that's a minor event. Essentially, that is a fizz in the soda burping, just a little bloop. That is nothing compared to what was going on before. The type of volcanism that was happening 12,000 plus years ago and in the biblical events and during Exodus, it's a completely different level of destruction and boiling earth. Apparently the stones outside turned red. When the year shortened to only 350 days, and many mankind switched to a 10-month calendar, including the Romans, which is why December is the 10th month and not the 12th month, then it was so miserable outside and it was so dry that it was almost impossible to live. It doesn't take much for us to feel overwhelmed. Now, why would that come about? How does that tie back to what I was talking about, interconnectivity? Charge is everywhere. Charge density, everything. Now, right now, as I move, the charge relationship between myself, the car, the sidewalk outside, this car next to me, is all within such a low order of magnitude. It's all about scale, right? So the order of magnitude is such that it just isn't very likely to induce any kind of arc or interchange. Now, that being said, like I have one of those Verilux depression lights or whatever. I was going to bed the other night, and just some static electricity on the blanket was making it flash from over a foot away because of the electric field. I mean, the energy is there, the gradient is there. It's just that it's not of an order of magnitude to cause a breakdown of permittivity. And the forces are so relatively equivalent. I saw one guy, he was arguing with me about the gravity and how things aren't accelerating due to electric field effects here on Earth. And he's sitting there talking like, yes, there is a subtle difference between the gravity between like a ship and a car falling towards the Earth. However, on an order of magnitude, it's so small you don't notice the acceleration. It'd be calculable, but it wouldn't be demonstrable and measurable at that scale. So, I mean, it is there. There is a difference of force between the car and the Earth and the ship and the Earth. But it's just such a small level. However, when you introduce a solar or a celestial body, not even necessarily a star, just even another moon or planetoid or a whole planet, such as Venus, when you introduce something like that, or when the moon came along, there is such a precipitous change in the charge accumulation and where it is. The entire solar circuit, and I need you to realize that the entire solar system circuit is basically a slow-acting analog circuit. If you change the dynamism of one of the bodies, it's going to change the effects on all of them. So as we come through the galactic cross and we actually start facing the center of the Milky Way without any dust in the way, there's going to necessarily be a change in potential, and there's going to be a change in the capacitance and inductance of the entire solar system circuit, because its position is changing and the entire charge relationship is changing. Charges that are on one side of the Earth will go to the other side, and of course as it rotates they'll move around. And that will change the magnetosphere. That's why we're seeing the change in the magnetosphere. It's not that the Earth's magma is shifting around. The magma is shifting around because of the change in the charge and the electromagnetic forces that are guiding the planet's dynamism within inside itself. So now you add another factor, this electrogravity. When you get two bodies that are so close to each other that they start having massive attraction, you're going to see changes in the crust. You're going to see uplift, and then as you move around and the tidal force lets go, then you're going to see a downshift. On top of that, if the expanding Earth is true, which seems very likely based on all the evidence, and just the simple conservation of energy, you've got all these particles bombarding the Earth and not all of them are leaving. If that's true, and the Earth grows because the sun or any star, it used to be the brown dwarf, I guess, but any star is feeding it particles and it's growing, and now it's been growing slowly and just kind of calmly. What happens when we face the galactic center? And how will the sun's dynamism change as it's part of it's a voltage source in the electric circuit, and it's running in parallel to all these other stars that its position has slowly been changing relative to, and now it's going to be exposed to the galactic core, where relatively speaking it will be weaker as compared to the larger voltage source in the galactic core. I don't know if it'll dim. I don't know if we'll perceive any effects on the sun with satellite imagery, other than this grand solar minimum that we're noticing. But what I am saying is that change of the sun, of our voltage source, and now you have every capacitive, inductive, and resistive element of all the planetoids that are involved in the solar system currently, they will also necessarily change in their relationship in that circuit, because in analog circuits, everything adjusts as the current and the potential is divided among the series and parallel circuits. Now, some things will be in series and some things will be in parallel. Most of it's in parallel. But by being in parallel, it's acting a lot of it as a transformer. And so what is it? How are the voltages and the currents transforming? Some of them are going to go up and some are going to go down. And as they change, the magnetosphere will change. And yes, it is possible that the poles could shift. It could be the magnetic poles shift. It could be the physical poles shift. Or it could be a matter of just the way that the crust and the magma. I mean, you got to understand that the magma or the crust is like the fingernail thickness here, versus the mantle is the entire width of the finger. So when we talk about the shifting crust, it really isn't that hard for this kind of level force to do. We're talking charge densities that must be, not charge densities, but charge volumes that must be way beyond anything we're used to. I mean, if a human touches an outlet, the current that flows through that outlet will hurt them. And when we do a little bit of qigong, when we feel some ions moving in our body, which ultimately that's what's happening, is you get extra ion movement and action potentials in your nervous system, you feel like this overwhelming sense of power. In fact, qigong psychosis is really, if you break it down, is really just all this extra charge circulating through the body. The person starts to feel invincible, which is completely ridiculous. There's no evidence to suggest that you would become, quote, invincible. It's just that Tao helps you to dissuade things that come to you. However, when you compare the amount of energy that a human is feeling when they're moving their chi, even if you include all the spiritual and dimensional chi that you can't measure with science and machinery, because it's in a different dimension, because we have real numbers versus imaginary numbers, so it doesn't mean that they don't exist. Fine, but even if you add that up, it is nothing compared to the power of charge differentiation that will be generated by passing objects. Even when they're far away, if they are large enough, they will necessitate changes in the movement. Now, it doesn't mean that the rain will stop working, or that it will over rain like as it did before, right? There was so much charge in the air that all this water was lifted up in the air, and then it just dumped and dumped and dumped and dumped. There's no proof that that's exactly what will happen, and in fact, it may just be a shift. But is it possible that as the magnetosphere changes, and then the inner potentials in the Earth adjust the alignment, then the poles kind of move, and then kind of move over here, and then the overall electric field forces the Earth to tilt in some way or another? Yeah, absolutely, because we're talking a force, literally, I think it was a billion, trillion times more, 10 to the 39, however that works out, times that of the mechanical gravity model. All right, it's all electrical, but when we talk about typical Newtonian gravity, it's a mechanical gravity. It is infinitesimally small. And just think, if I go up on that roof and I jump off, I'm going to feel the effect of gravity. I mean, even if I had full qigong, and I had, again, if I took some kind of drug, or had full qigong psychosis, and I was just like, I am a great golden god, and then I go up and I leap off, it doesn't matter. I'm going to feel the kersplat. It's going to hurt. And we as a species have a really hard time understanding that scale, and certainly we have a hard time understanding how things are structured. It's such a problem that for hundreds of years now, geologists have fought and acted like it's impossible that an entire continent could sink. Are you kidding me? I mean, we're talking in the scale of if you look at the diameter of the Earth, the crust sinking from above the water to below the water, like for example Doggerland, Sunderland, Zealandia, Beringia, the one outside Mauritius, which we're just going to go ahead and call Lemuria, and of course everyone's favorite black sheep, Atlantis. For them to fall a few thousand feet is nothing. I mean, it is ultimately nothing. Just a small burp in the mantle, especially if it's full of water and it's boiling inside there. Just a small burp and release of, a volcano over here letting go, or maybe just a large chunk of rock kind of moves over to another part of the mantle suddenly, precipitating an earthquake that would be of a huge scale. Any of that could easily explain why, something that was this shape became this shape. Ultimately, for the Earth, that's all it is. It's such a small change, it's not even funny. And for us, though, that small change is immeasurable. And I've shown the math elsewhere, but you can do it yourself. Use this to explain to flat earthers. I happen to have a basketball right here. It's kind of ironic. You have all these flat earthers saying that, where's the curvature? I can't see the curve. Okay, compared to a basketball, a human is smaller than the flu virus. Think about that for a second. A human is smaller than the flu virus. How can a flu virus possibly have anything to say on the K curvature of this ball? It can't, because we're talking microns compared to something big. Now, if I bounce this ball, the viruses and bacteria on this are going for the ride. They have no choice. And some of them are going to feel the impact, and other ones, it's not even going to be a thing. It's just going to, there's a change in orientation, but they don't have extra sense organs to particularly know. They know in the immediate area around them that, there's another bacteria, or there's another amoeba, or whatever it is at their scale, because different bacteria are different scale. If you haven't looked at this up, they can be 10 or 100 or even 1,000 times in different in size. But a human on the earth right now, as I'm sitting here, is smaller than a virus is to this basketball. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about catastrophism, that the interconnectedness of charge is always happening. And a small change on that level, is a cosmic change in the human's experience. Okay? So explain that when you're explaining to other people, because otherwise they're not going to get it. It's just biblical stories, and it's Noah's flood and blah, blah, blah. Ultimately speaking, those floods, just when the raining for either 7 or 40 days, was nothing compared to what's possible. I mean, it really is nothing. I mean, on Jupiter, there's storms of 800 mile an hour winds, and on Neptune, I think it's well over 1,000 miles an hour. All right, I gotta go get my treatment. You guys have a good one. I will see you next time. Like, share, subscribe.